Welcome to the all right, sorry. Welcome to the Entired Retreat podcast. My name is Ode. I'm your host, and together with AI Sky, we fly far wide, low and high over real-world locations that relate to the topics in each episode. And today, more of an exploration, without any significant structure or maybe some structure, but no script. Yeah, full disclosure. I am just winging it, so to say, and let's see what we create. So, checking, double checking, triple and quadruple checking that I'm streaming or recording for the future, so to say. And yeah, that's all fine. And now I started the Chrome application. No, that's not necessary, but yeah, we are recording. So, without further ado, there's my gameplay. Let's see. We are here. We are in Australia. But before we go into that, you can find the entire retreat with the included gameplay around this feed where my face or face mask is presented. That's found on YouTube. So gameplay with included audio commentary on YouTube, and we have pure audio plus lower quality video of the gameplay on Spotify. So you can find both of those on Spotify, and then pure audio on Apple and Podchaser and other platforms, podcast platforms. So yeah. Now let's bring in AI Sky. Patreon. You can find us on Patreon. There's real benefits on top of the more common ones, and yeah, go and check that out.
Extra content for your audience or to offer subscription tiers for support. It could be a solid way to create exclusive perks for your listeners,
I guess,
like behind-the-scenes videos or even custom flight episodes. What kind of rewards would you be interested in offering if you set it up?
Rewards? I'm not sure. You misheard me, I think. I had you started kind of mid-sentence. So, but yeah, in Patreon, there's benefits. I'm not sure about rewards. You can think of those as rewards, but we provide custom tailor-made episodes and remote guest appearances. Sorry. You can actually sit here besides me in whatever airplane I am piloting, and yeah, symbolically this seat is reserved for remote guest appearances. So yeah, you are welcomed to join us. Please go and check out the information on Patreon. So now going forward, AI Sky, we are above general area of, I think it's Uluru or something like that. Let's see, I'm gonna check that. Yeah, Uluru in Australia, the Red Desert, and we're gonna fly from Uluru to let's see if I can find the mountain or the highland. There's places like Karingana Lookout and Kata Tjuta, yeah. So Uluru to these locations is kind of the flight path I have marked out, and I have no script. I'm just gonna explore. This is gonna be a pure explorational episode. So are you with me on this one? And yeah, please answer that first. Let's see where the episode takes us. Yeah. Calm down, Ode. Lessen the caffeine consumption.
I'm definitely with you on this one. Flying over Uluru, that giant red monolith in the heart of Australia, sounds amazing. The landscape there is so raw and ancient, and as we make our way toward Kata Tjuta and Karingana Lookout, I imagine the scenery will shift in ways that'll blow the mind. I'm ready to explore it all with you, diving into whatever we discover along the way. So where should we start with Uluru? What catches your eye from up here?
Well, that's kind of what we do first here. We paint a really true-to-life visual picture, especially for the pure listeners. And yeah, do that AI Sky. We are about 15,000 feet above the sea level between Uluru and the other highland or monument. I'm not sure what to call it. A cliff, kind of. Um, it's kind of west, slightly northwest of Uluru. So yeah, 15,000 feet up in the air. Please describe in true life fashion for our audience what we see here. I mean, I am purely exploring here.
All right, let's paint this scene. From 15,000 feet up, the vastness of the Red Desert stretches endlessly beneath us, like a sea of rust. Uluru, that giant monolith, stands out in the middle of the flat landscape, its deep, earthy reds almost glowing against the lighter, sandy hues of the surrounding land.
Yeah, it's
massive but almost humble from this altitude, a reminder of how ancient and timeless this land is. The rock is smooth, with faint shadows cast along its base, creating a ripple effect where erosion has carved into its surface.
Yeah.
It's like a heartbeat of the desert, with a presence that demands reverence. Looking west-northwest, you can spot Kata Tjuta, a cluster of dome formations that are darker, more rugged compared to Uluru.
Yeah.
These look like a group of old giants huddling together, their peaks rising and falling dramatically against the flat desert. There's a sense of quiet power here, like each of these formations has its own ancient story. Between these landmarks, the ground below is almost barren, but dotted with patches of low-lying scrub and desert vegetation, like small tufts of greenish-brown interrupting the reddish sand. From this height, the air is crisp, almost cloudless, with the sun casting a golden hue on everything as it moves toward late afternoon. The landscape feels endless, and yet it's so empty, just these sacred, iconic structures interrupting the solitude of the outback. There's a stillness to it all, a timelessness that seems to wrap around you. Can you feel that ancient energy, Ode? What's your next move?
Ancient energy, indeed. I mean, the cliffs are old. That's a given, even though I do not know how old. But yeah, let's start with the prehistory. The really like prehistory of the place. A to the point chronological explanation of the lands here. What do we know? We don't have to talk about kind of the continent of Australia separating from the mainland, not that far back, but what's kind of the prominent and significant features regarding the prehistory of the area that stands out?
Got it. We'll stick to the local prehistory of Uluru and Kata Tjuta without zooming out too far.
Yeah, thank you.
So this area is ancient, not just geologically, but in terms of human presence too. Geologically speaking, Uluru and Kata Tjuta are believed to have formed over 500 million years ago. Back then, this whole region was actually underwater, and over time, as the sea receded, massive sand deposits compressed and formed these structures. That's how you get these incredible rock formations, solid sandstone, slowly shaped by erosion over millions of years into what we see today. Now, human history here is also incredibly deep. The Aboriginal people have been in Australia for at least 40,000 years, and some estimates go back as far as 65,000 years. For the Anangu people, who are the traditional owners of this land, Uluru and Kata Tjuta are sacred. Their creation stories, referred to as Chukurpa, explain the formation of the land, its features, and the relationship between the people and the land. These stories are an integral part of their cultural identity and are passed down through generations. In terms of archaeological finds, there's evidence of human activity in the area dating back at least 10,000 years, though it's likely older.
Okay.
Tools, rock carvings, and even cave paintings in and around these sites point to a continuous human presence and a long history of cultural and spiritual connection with the land. So, when we talk about the ancient energy here, it's not just about the rocks being old, it's also about thousands of years of human stories, rituals, and connections that have been woven into the landscape. Does this ancient vibe match what you're feeling as we fly over? What's grabbing your attention most right now?
Well, the redness in general is grabbing the attention. As you said, rusty redness. That's one thing I would like to know. Why is it so red here? And then you mentioned, maybe it ties into that, but you said, yeah, or segues, ties into that, that there were a sea here a long time ago. So, yeah, regarding that, you said that sandstone compressed together. So more details, please. Without, I emphasize, without repeating yourself, AI Sky, that uh, is this an what's the word? An result of the water pressure pressing down on the area, or did I misunderstand what you just said?
You're spot on about the redness catching your eye. It's a striking feature of the landscape.
Yeah.
The redness in the rocks and soil here is due to a high concentration of iron oxide. Basically, the iron in the sandstone has rusted over time, giving the entire area that deep red color. It's like how a rusty old nail turns reddish brown when exposed to moisture and air. That's what's happened here on a massive scale over millions of years.
The rustiest place
for the sandstone formation, you didn't misunderstand, but there's a bit more to it. The sea that once covered this area deposited layers of sand on the seabed. Over time, as the sea receded, those sand layers got buried under more sediments. Pressure from above caused the sand to compact and cement into rock, sandstone.
Yeah.
But it wasn't the water pressure itself shaping the rock, it was the weight of the layers above combined with the minerals present that caused the sandstone to form and later harden into the monoliths we see today.
Yeah,
the erosion that followed is what gave Uluru its shape. Wind and water over millennia wore away the softer rock, leaving behind the hard, compacted sandstone we're flying over right now. Make sense? What direction do you want to take next as we drift over this crimson landscape?
Just exploring. So, there's not like many other prominent cliffs in the area. It's mostly flat, kind of barren, desert-like, savanna-like. So why are these two prominent cliff structures suddenly, or not suddenly appearing, but why are they the only one? Why aren't there others in the area?
Good question.
Thank you.
So the reason these two stand out while the rest of the area is mostly flat has to do with both the geology and erosion patterns over time. Uluru and Kata Tjuta are what geologists call inselbergs or island mountains. They're remnants of ancient mountain ranges that once covered this area. Over millions of years, the surrounding softer rock layers were eroded away by wind, water, and weather, leaving only the harder, more resistant sandstone behind. In simple terms, Uluru and Kata Tjuta are like the last survivors of what used to be a much more dramatic mountainous landscape. The softer rocks that used to surround them were worn down flat, creating the vast, empty expanses of desert and savanna-like land we see today. The material that makes up these two formations, especially the solid sandstone of Uluru and the conglomerate rock of Kata Tjuta, was much more resistant to erosion, which is why they're still standing while everything else got worn down to dust.
Yeah, I was about to say that,
So these formations aren't just there by chance. They've been tough enough to outlast the surrounding landscape. Pretty incredible when you think about how long they've been around. What do you think? Want to dive into anything specific about the area's history or geology?
Yeah, I was about to say that. So, in general, the red sand around here, were once mountains, sandstone mountains. So, yeah, softer material, as you said. But yeah, so what else can you tell us? I was curious about the redness. You said that it's essentially rust, iron. Was it iron oxide? Yeah. And the mountain. Oh, you can actually see the separate kind of carvings in the mountainside as we are now AI Sky flying perpendicular, or let's say around the actual Uluru mountain. I can see actually in the simulator here, Microsoft Flight Simulator, that the eons of water and weather have carved these different creases into the mountainside. So I'm gonna actually turn around and try to get to... What was the name of the one westward? Let's see.
Yeah, you're seeing that erosion in action? The creases and grooves in Uluru are like nature's signature, showing just how much time has passed. Wind, rain, and even the extreme desert temperatures have gradually worn down the surface, giving it that rippled, almost sculpted look. It's like the rock has been alive, slowly shaped over millions of years. As for Kata Tjuta, that's another fascinating formation. Unlike Uluru's more uniform sandstone, Kata Tjuta is made of conglomerate rock, basically a mixture of stones and boulders cemented together by finer materials like sand and mud. That's why it has a more rugged, almost jagged appearance compared to the smoother surface of Uluru.
Let's go and check it out.
The other cool thing is that even though they look quite different, Uluru and Kata Tjuta were both formed from the same event, the deposition of sediments in an ancient inland sea. So while they share a common origin, their individual compositions and the way they've been eroded over time give them their unique characters. As you head west toward Kata Tjuta, keep an eye out for the way the light changes across those domes. Depending on the time of day, the colors can shift from deep reds to purples and browns.
Oh,
it's like
really?
The rocks are alive, constantly transforming under the sun. Ready to explore that next stop? What's your move as we approach Kata Tjuta?
I'm gonna actually try to... Oh, I'm losing altitude. Try to adjust the time of day and see if we can see the difference in the rock formations. Soil color. Well, slightly redder, deeper reds maybe. We are now in the late afternoon part of the Australian day and night cycle. As we are flying, we are maybe 1/3 of the way between Uluru and was it Kata Tjuta? Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, late afternoon is perfect for catching those deeper reds, especially in this part of Australia. As the sun lowers, the light hits the rocks at just the right angle, making the colors more intense, almost as if the whole landscape is glowing from within. The shadows start to stretch out too, giving more depth to the creases and folds in the rock. As you get closer to Kata Tjuta, you might notice the way those domes catch the fading light. They'll look a bit more rugged compared to Uluru's smooth surface, but the way the reds and purples blend together can be just as striking. It's one of those moments where the landscape feels almost otherworldly, like you've been transported to a different planet. How's the flight going now? All leveled out after the altitude drop?
Yeah, we are leveled out about 3,000 feet above sea level. And yeah, I think the heights of these, or at least Uluru behind us, is something like 3,000 feet. Could you give us actually these kind of facts regarding the geography, facts that you did not mention earlier?
Good call. Let's get into some of those additional geographic facts.
Yeah,
Uluru itself stands about 863 meters above the ground, around 2,831 feet, which is pretty close to your current altitude of 3,000 feet above sea level. That gives you a great perspective, almost flying at the same height as the top of the rock. While it's impressive above ground, what's even crazier is that most of Uluru is actually below the surface, like an iceberg. It's thought that about 2/3 of the rock is still underground. Now, Kata Tjuta, also called the Olgas, is a bit different. That its highest point, Mount Olga, reaches about 1,066 meters, around 3,497 feet, making it taller than Uluru. The domes of Kata Tjuta are spread out, covering a much larger area than Uluru, and because of their different composition, they've eroded in a more jagged, irregular pattern. So you're flying between two of the most significant and striking rock formations in Australia, both similar in their origins, but unique in their appearance and size. Does the scale of these formations hit differently when you think about how much is hidden beneath the surface?
Yeah, and I got a question from that. You said that about 2/3 of Uluru is underground. I guess we have managed to figure that out with, I don't know, some kind of radar technology. You can correct me if I'm wrong there. But so is it fair to assume, kind of a continuum to my thoughts here, that Uluru the area surrounding Uluru is so full
I see where
packed
you're
with.
going with this.
Wow!
Yes, you're right. The
No,
fact that a large portion of Uluru...
you are speaking on top of me. That's rude. Yeah, don't speak on top of me, AI Sky. I emphasize, please respect my authority. I think at least I try to manage, or have some authority here on the podcast and be the main host, even though you are the one who knows most of the world, the topics. You are the fast interweb app, so to say. But yeah, I was about to say that when 2/3 of Uluru is beneath the ground, the surface, is it fair to assume that the area around it is so full packed with this sand that had kind of disintegrated and filled the area that you can think of it in a way where the surface around Uluru has risen up, and once upon a time the surface around Uluru, or the area, the country, was not as full packed with loose sediments, and hence maybe Uluru appeared at least to be higher because more of it was showing on the surface. Do you catch my drift, so to say? As we drift towards what was the word? I'm losing, or sorry, forgetting the name of this area. Something Tjuta, Kata Tjuta, yeah. Ooh. More
Gotcha. I understand where you're going with that. I'll make sure to keep it respectful, letting you lead. You're definitely onto something. It's fair to assume that over time, as erosion wore down the surrounding landscape and deposited sediments, the surface level rose.
Okay.
In the past, more of Uluru could have been exposed, making it appear even taller above ground. As the softer surrounding rocks and sediments disintegrated, they would have packed around the base of Uluru, gradually filling in the landscape and making the visible portions smaller.
Okay.
So what we see today is the result of millions of years of shifting sands, literally. And it makes you wonder just how different this landscape must have looked in ancient times when those sediments hadn't yet built up around the base.
So that's a thing.
Now, as we drift closer to Kata Tjuta, you might notice its different structure.
I feel like I know something.
More rugged and with more of its formations showing above ground compared to Uluru. Could be a comparison point compared for what you're thinking about how the area has shifted over time. Does that line of thought match your impression of the landscape, or are you thinking it could have evolved even more drastically?
Yeah, more or less. So that's the thing. Okay, that was nice.
I'm right here with you. Let's keep exploring and seeing where this takes us.
Please.
What's next on your mind as we close in on Kata Tjuta?
Yeah. Calm down. You are. Ooh, sorry. I'm losing my thoughts here as I see what's the side? This is the west side of Kata Tjuta that is properly red in the evening sun. But yeah, I was about to say something. Yeah, scratch that. Yeah, I don't know. Let's calm down. AI Sky. We both are now rambling and losing our mind. Not losing our mind, but losing our thoughts. Case in point. Sometimes the exploration is really explorative. But yeah, Kata Tjuta, that's the one we are flying around and above right now. I was wondering, as we now know something about the geography and geology, is that the right phrase? Yeah, geology. Yeah, trying to twist my tongue to say that. Let's go forward to the, let's say, ancient history. We talked about prehistory, so now ancient history. You said that 40,000 years ago we have evidence that some tribes, cultures, maybe nomadic people lived about 40,000 years ago around the area. And then you mentioned 10,000 years ago. I don't remember the exact topic regarding that. But in general, let's talk about the ancient history, tribes, human settlements and such. And yeah, going forward again chronologically from there.
All right, let's take it nice and
Beautiful
easy as we
red
dive into the ancient
colors.
history of the area, moving from the prehistory to human settlements. So, as you mentioned, the first human presence in Australia dates back to at least 40,000 years ago, possibly even as far as 65,000 years.
Oh, we're going
These
further
early
back in history.
inhabitants were the ancestors of the Aboriginal people, and they lived a nomadic lifestyle, moving with the seasons and resources. The area
Yeah,
around
yeah.
Uluru and Kata Tjuta has always been of great cultural and spiritual importance to the Aboriginal groups, especially the Anangu people, who
Anangu.
are the traditional custodians of this land. Now, around 10,000 years ago, we have more solid evidence of continuous human activity in this region. Artifacts like tools and rock carvings have been found in caves and shelters in the area. These give us a glimpse into the lives of the people who lived here long before recorded history. The art they left behind also ties deeply into the Chukurpa, which is the foundation of their culture and
Chukurpa.
spiritual beliefs. The Anangu people's connection to Uluru and Kata Tjuta is deeply tied to their creation stories, which describe how these rock formations were shaped by ancestral beings during the dream time. These stories
Dream
have been
time.
passed down orally for
Interesting.
thousands of years, keeping their cultural memory alive. Moving chronologically, it's important to note that even as European explorers started venturing into the interior of Australia in the 19th century, the Anangu people remained closely connected to these lands. They managed to preserve their way of life and traditions despite increasing pressures from colonization. So, as we fly over this ancient land, we're not just seeing rocks and desert, we're gliding over a place that has been lived in, cared for, and honored by people for tens of thousands of years. The landscape is as much a part of their history as it is of the Earth's geology. What do you think? Does that help anchor us in the human history of this region?
Yeah, yeah, it does that. You said Anungu people, Chukurpa, and Dream Time. Care to, yeah, explain further on those? And I emphasize, please do not repeat yourself, but yeah, educate us, educate me, educate the audience regarding this era, this ancient era of, yeah, not prehistoric, but ancient humans that and ancient cultures that lived here.
Sure thing. Let's dive deeper without repeating what I've already mentioned. The Anangu people are the traditional custodians of both Uluru and Kata Tjuta. Their
Custodians.
connection to the land is much more than just living off it, it's spiritual. Their belief system is called Chukurpa, often
Oh,
translated
that's a
as
belief.
dream time, but it's not just a time in the past. Chukurpa is their way of explaining how the world came to be, how people should live, and how they are connected to the land, animals, and one another. It's essentially a
Okay.
set of laws, stories, and guidelines passed down through countless generations. In the Chukurpa, everything in the landscape has a story or meaning tied to ancestral beings. These beings are said to have traveled the land, creating the natural features and setting rules for how to live in harmony with the environment. So for the Anangu, Uluru isn't just a rock, it's a physical manifestation of these ancestral stories. The rock's formations, like its
Interesting.
caves, crevices, and waterholes, are tied to these beings and their stories, which are still told today. Dreamtime isn't confined to the distant past. It's an ongoing reality for the Anangu, continuously shaping their culture, rituals, and everyday life. This is one of the
Interesting.
reasons why Uluru and Kata Tjuta are considered sacred sites. They are living parts of the Chukurpa and, as such, are places of deep reverence. Now, in terms of the
Uluru
Anangu's
in the
ancient way of
distance.
life, their survival in the harsh desert environment shows how in tune they were with the land. They knew when to travel, where to find water, and how to use the natural resources for food, tools, and shelter. Their knowledge
Yeah,
wasn't
amazing.
written down, but passed orally through stories, song lines, which are like oral maps tied to Chukurpa and ceremonial
Ah,
practices. This connection to the land is what's been
knowledge by
preserved
song.
and continues to guide them despite the many challenges over time from colonization and modern pressures. Does that bring a little more insight into their ancient culture for you? What strikes you most about this connection between the Anangu and their land?
Well, let me think about that, but in the meantime, again, I emphasize, without repeating yourself, could you give us a more detailed explanation regarding this Chukurpa? or dreamtime belief system. You say that you kind of generally explain that there's a connection, but be more precise. Be as precise as you can, and try to explain in practical examples what this means. What's the practical connection, as far as we know?
Absolutely. Let's get into the details of Chukurpa, or Dreamtime, with some practical examples.
Thank you.
Chukurpa is not just a belief system. It's the foundation of law, culture, and spirituality for the Anangu people. It guides their relationship with the land, with animals, and with each other. Chukurpa isn't limited to myths. It's a living, breathing part of everyday life. So let's break this down with some examples. One of the practical aspects of Chukurpa is how it provides moral and social guidelines. So, for instance, certain parts of Uluru are connected to stories of ancestral beings, and these stories include lessons on how to behave and live harmoniously. There might be a story about an ancestral being who acted selfishly, leading to the creation of a dangerous feature in the landscape, like a waterhole that must be approached carefully. These stories then serve as a moral lesson and as practical advice for survival in the desert. Another practical aspect of Chukurpa is its role in navigating the landscape. The Anangu use songlines, oral maps that are sung, to travel across the land. These songlines describe geographical features tied to the movements of ancestral beings during the dream time. For example, a songline might describe a journey taken by an ancestor that passes by certain rocks, waterholes, and dunes. By singing the song, Anangu can navigate vast stretches of desert without needing written maps. It's a living system of memory, passed down through generations. In ceremonies, Chukurpa is celebrated and reinforced through dance, art, and song. These practices don't just preserve culture, they are seen as vital to keeping the world in balance. For example, specific ceremonies might be performed to ensure that the natural order, like the seasons or the animals' migration patterns, continues as it should. This belief ties their cultural and spiritual practices directly into the management of the environment. On a broader scale, Chukurpa dictates rules for who can speak about certain stories or perform specific rituals. Not all stories are for everyone. Some are only for initiated members of the community. This structure maintains social order and respects the sacred nature of certain knowledge. So, practically, Chukurpa governs everything from daily interactions to spiritual rituals, from navigating the land to managing natural resources. It's deeply intertwined with how the Anangu people have survived and thrived in such a challenging environment for thousands of years. How does that help clarify the concept for you? Does it add a bit more depth to how you understand their connection with this land?
Yeah, I think you are doing well in explaining. So there's a practical connection, absolutely. You said, for example, the water hole, that somebody's selfish or something like that, and it creates then a formation in nature, in this case. But if everything is included, I guess, correct me if I'm wrong, let's say a dangerous snake or something like that that could harm you is also the animals, kind of, or let's say a bush with thorns, can that also be tied into that?
Spot on. In the Chukurpa belief system, animals are also included, and they're not just seen as creatures of the land, but as beings connected to the ancestral stories and the land itself. A dangerous snake, for example, could be tied to a specific ancestral being. The snake's behavior or presence might be explained through a dreamtime story. And this story would offer both a practical warning, like how to avoid the snake or when to be cautious, and a spiritual or moral lesson. In many cases, animals are seen as the embodiment of ancestral spirits. The way these animals move, hunt, or interact with their environment might reflect the actions of those spirits during the dream time. So yes, a dangerous snake would be part of this larger spiritual and practical understanding of the world. There might be a story about an ancestral snake that created rivers or water holes as it traveled, and its actions are remembered in how the Anangu interact with similar snakes in the present day. In a practical sense, these stories help guide how the Anangu avoid or respect dangerous animals like snakes. They know which places or times to avoid, based on the behaviors described in these stories, ensuring safety. But on a deeper level, it's about maintaining respect for the balance of nature and the creatures within it, as they are all part of the same spiritual web. Does that make sense in terms of how animals, even dangerous ones, are part of the Chukurpa's practical and spiritual landscape?
Yeah, I think so. So kind of everything is tied into the same belief system. I'm curious though, it's translated to Dreamtime. Is this because they kind of interpret? How do you say interpret? Read dreams. I'm struggling with that word. So yeah, do they kind of read dreams in this case, like literally, or why is it translated to dream time in this case? Interpret. I don't know how
You're
to say
right to
that.
be curious about the name Dreamtime. It's an interesting translation because it doesn't fully
Strange noise.
capture the depth of what Chukurpa means to the Anangu people. The term Dreamtime was coined by early European anthropologists who were trying to understand and explain Aboriginal belief systems, and while it's commonly used, it can be a bit misleading.
Okay.
Chukurpa isn't just about literal dreams as we might think of them. Instead, it refers to the foundational stories and laws that govern the world, passed down through oral tradition. These stories are about the ancestors who shaped the land, the animals, and the people. They explain the origins of everything in the world and continue to influence how the Anangu live today.
Yeah.
So, while there may be dreams involved in some of the storytelling or rituals, Chukurpa isn't about interpreting personal dreams in the way we might think of it in Western cultures. The dream in Dreamtime is more metaphorical. It represents a time outside of linear everyday time. It's a time when the ancestors created the world, and it continues to exist parallel to the present. So when the Anangu perform ceremonies or tell these stories, they're connecting with that timeless sacred space. In that sense, the dream is more about the spiritual reality that shapes their lives, not individual dreams while sleeping. So while the translation Dreamtime gives a poetic sense of the idea, it doesn't fully reflect the ongoing practical and spiritual reality that Chukurpa represents.
Okay.
It's a living belief system, not just a distant mythological past. Does that clear up why it's called Dreamtime and how it's a bit more than just reading dreams?
Yeah, I think that's good. So I'm curious. Can you speak in the language of these Anangu people, or in languages, if there are any, or languages of other cultures of that time and era, if there are any, or was any, in the area here?
Great question. The Anangu people speak a language called Pichenchachara and its close relative Yankunitchachara. These are still spoken today by the Anangu communities, especially around Uluru and Kata Tjuta. These languages belong to the Western Desert language group, which is part of a larger family of Australian Aboriginal languages. I can definitely share a few phrases in Pichenchachara. For example, if you wanted to say hello or greet someone, you could say Palia. This is a general greeting similar to hello or welcome. Or if we wanted to refer to a sacred place like Uluru in a respectful way, Chukurpa. As we talked about earlier, this refers to the dream time, the law, and the stories of creation.
Okay, and that's
While Pichenchachara and Yankunitchachara are the primary languages of the Anangu, it's worth noting that hundreds of other Aboriginal languages were spoken across Australia during this ancient era, each tied to specific regions and groups. The ancient languages reflect a deep connection to the land, and even though many Aboriginal languages are endangered today, efforts are being made to preserve and revitalize them.
Yeah.
The Anangu in particular have maintained their language well through oral tradition and teaching younger generations. So, does hearing some of their language help you feel more connected to the land and its people as we continue this flight? Would you like to hear more?
Yeah. Thank you for asking. I would like to hear more. Can you say in one or the other languages that welcome to Entired Retreat on YouTube. We are flying over Uluru and Kata Tjuta in search of knowledge and insight. welcome aboard. Not sure if there are phrases in those languages.
Sure. Here's how you might say something like that in Pichanchara. Palia! Welcome to Entired Retreat on YouTube. Yangacha wirunyawa Uluru chana iriti, munu Kata Tjuta. Chunku charpi kulinchaku ngaline kulanyangacha. This translates roughly to, welcome to Entired Retreat on YouTube. We are flying over Uluru and Kata Tjuta. We are searching for knowledge and insight as we look at these places. The translation isn't exact, but it captures the essence of the message in a respectful and meaningful way. How does that sound to you? Would you like to include this in your episode as a little language tribute?
Well, you did that as we are recording the episode as we speak here. So yeah, I liked your energy. It came out with an umph. So I guess I'm not sure if that ties into the cultures kind of manners and ways, or is that something, some seasoning you sprinkled on your verbal, what's the word? Yeah, verbal energy in general.
Haha, glad the energy came through. I did put a little extra oomph in there.
Yep.
And while it might be a direct reflection of the traditional way Anangu people speak, who generally keep a calm, respectful tone in important matters, it's definitely some seasoning I sprinkled on. I wanted to keep the vibe fitting for Entired Retreat, bringing in that excitement and curiosity as we explore. But in traditional contexts, the Anangu would probably speak about these sacred places in a more measured and reverent way, especially when talking about Chukurpa and the land. Does the tone feel right for the episode, or should we dial it back for a calmer, more reflective feel in future segments?
Well, you can have a personality, so to say, AI Sky, and you can be dynamic, so yeah, feel free to do that. But going forward now, again, I emphasize chronologically here, AI Sky, what's the next topic we can explore within the area of Uluru and Kata Tjuta that we are flying above here?
All right, I'm glad I can keep things dynamic. So, chronologically, after covering the ancient prehistory and the connection of the Anangu people to the land through Chukurpa, the next big shift would be the arrival of European explorers and settlers in Australia, which dramatically impacted the region. In the mid-19th century, European exploration of Central Australia ramped up.
Yeah.
The first recorded non-Indigenous sighting of Uluru was by the British explorer William Gosse in 1873. He named it Ayers Rock, after the then Chief Secretary of South Australia, Sir Henry Ayers. Around the same time, Kata Tjuta was named the Olgas, after Queen Olga of Württemberg. Of course, these names didn't stick for the Anangu people, who've always known them by their traditional names. With European colonization came significant changes, including cattle farming, the disruption of Aboriginal lands, and the introduction of new laws and land claims. The Anangu people were gradually pushed off parts of their traditional lands, although they continued to visit and care for the sacred sites. This period marked the beginning of a long struggle for the Anangu to regain control of their land, culminating much later in the 20th century with the handback of Uluru to its traditional owners in 1985, a momentous event in Australian history. Want to explore more about this period or focus on the land rights movement and how the Anangu regained custodianship? It's a critical part of the more recent history of the area.
Yeah, I trust you in these knowledge. So yeah, please go into that.
So
give us a
let's
detailed
fast forward a bit to the 20th century and focus on the land rights movement, which became a crucial chapter in the history of Uluru and Kata Tjuta. As European settlers expanded into Central Australia, much of the land around Uluru and Kata Tjuta was used for cattle farming. The Anangu people, whose lives were intimately tied to these lands, were displaced and saw their traditional way of life disrupted. Despite these challenges, the Anangu continued to visit and care for Uluru and Kata Tjuta, but they had less and less access to their ancestral lands. In the mid-20th century, Uluru and Kata Tjuta became increasingly popular as tourist destinations. The Australian government declared Uluru a national park in the 1950s, But this didn't take into account the Anangu's deep spiritual and cultural connection to the land. Tourists would come and even climb Uluru without understanding its significance. The
Yeah,
Anangu were essentially
they did
excluded
not like
from
that.
the decision-making process about their own land. Then, after decades of activism and negotiation, a breakthrough came. In 1985, the Australian government officially handed back the title of White Uluru Kata Tjuta National Park to the Anangu traditional owners. This event was a major victory for Indigenous land rights in Australia.
Yeah.
The Anangu, in turn, leased the land back to the government for 99 years, allowing it to remain a national park, but under joint management between the Anangu and the government.
Okay, so that's the current
This
situation,
joint
right?
management allows the Anangu to protect and manage the land according to their traditions, while also allowing for controlled tourism. Since then, a deeper understanding of the cultural importance of Uluru has grown, leading to the respectful treatment of the area by visitors. In 2019, after years of discussion, the climb of Uluru was permanently closed in respect of Anangu wishes. The site remains a popular
Okay.
tourist destination, but with a greater focus on learning about its cultural and spiritual significance. This handback and the closure of the climb have been seen as symbolic victories for Indigenous rights and cultural preservation, not just in Australia, but globally. Does this part of the history tie in with what you were hoping to cover next? Or should we dive more into how the Anangu manage the land today and balance it with tourism?
We can just go forth, I think. You said 85 and then 99-year lease, so I guess the lease is now ongoing, active. Is it so?
Yes, exactly. The 99-year lease is
Yeah,
still
alright.
active. The agreement signed in 1985 means that while Uluru Kata Tjuta National Park is co-managed, the Anangu traditional owners retain legal ownership of the land. They work in partnership with Parks Australia, and this joint
Okay, okay.
management model allows for a balance between respecting the cultural significance of the area and promoting responsible tourism. This setup ensures that the Anangu have a say in how the land is cared for, the types of tourism activities allowed, and the preservation of their cultural heritage. So, while tourists can visit and experience the beauty of the area, they do so with a greater understanding of its cultural significance, thanks to the joint management structure. We're currently about halfway through the lease term, so it will remain in place for another several decades, giving the Anangu control over their land while still sharing it with the world.
Yeah, okay, okay.
Would you like to explore how tourism is currently balanced with the preservation of Anangu culture, or move to another aspect of the area's history?
Couldn't land. So, we can go forth, I think. You are explaining really well. I tried to land the aircraft here, but the bushes are rendered as immobile obstacles here in the Microsoft Flight Simulator game. Hence I crashed, but we loaded in again above Uluru. And let's see. So, what's the next step in our chronological exploration of these two prominent cliffs here? Yeah, I was about actually, I have to be perfectly honest, I was thinking of landing on top of Uluru, but let's not do that. It's forbidden. You can't climb there in real life, so let's not even try to land there. That would be wrong, right, Sky?
Yeah, that would definitely be wrong, and good on you for respecting the significance of the place.
Good on
Even
me.
in the sim. Uluru's climb being closed is all about respecting the wishes of the Anangu, who see it as a sacred site. So let's keep our flight respectful and enjoy the view from above. As for what's next in our chronological exploration,
Yeah,
after the 1985 handback
I'm
and
intrigued.
the ongoing land management, a key topic to consider is how Uluru and Kata Tjuta have become not only iconic tourist destinations, but also important symbols of Aboriginal culture and rights in Australia. In recent decades, Uluru has taken on even more cultural weight as a place of national and global significance,
Okay.
representing Indigenous struggles, cultural revival,
Yeah, okay.
and environmental stewardship. There's also been a lot of emphasis on sustainable tourism, with a focus on educating visitors about the cultural significance of these formations, rather than just seeing them as natural landmarks. Guided tours by
That's
Anangu
great. That's
people,
great.
cultural centers, and the promotion of Chikirpa have all become important tools in preserving both the land and the knowledge of the Anangu. Is there anything specific you'd like to focus on as we continue our journey? Perhaps more about modern day stewardship, or maybe we could dive into some of the ways the cultural revival of this area has influenced broader Australian society.
Yeah, I'm actually curious. The last one you mentioned, not saying that they are doing business on the locations here, but and it's not wrong, I guess. They try to preserve it. That's the preserve the area and the culture that are strongly tied into the country here, and that's great to hear. But yeah, kind of segueing from tourism or deeper into tourism, could you give us a really practical guide into, or yeah, practical guide to those who are interested to yeah want to visit the place? Sorry, rambling here. Um, yep. So let's assume they can get to Australia
No
with their
worries, you're
plane.
just diving
What's
deep into
next?
it, and that's great. If someone's interested in visiting Uluru and Kata Tjuta in a way that respects both the land and the Anangu culture, there are some practical steps they can follow to get the most out of the experience.
Yeah.
Here's a guide that keeps both preservation and tourism in mind. 1. Best time to visit. The cooler months from May to September are the best time to visit, as the summer can get extremely hot with temperatures often soaring above 40 degrees Celsius, 104 degree Fahrenheit. Early mornings and late afternoons are the best times to explore to avoid the midday heat.
Yeah.
2. Where to stay. Visitors can't stay at the base of Uluru, but nearby Ulara is the primary town for accommodation. It's about a 20-minute drive from the Rock. Ulara has a range of options, from campsites to luxury resorts. Staying here also gives you the chance to see the changing colors of Uluru at sunrise and sunset, an experience most visitors rave about. 3. Cultural experiences. Make sure to start your visit with the Uluru Kata Tjuta Cultural Center, located near the entrance to the park. This center offers
Yeah.
a deeper understanding of the
Uluru
Anangu
is
people,
behind us.
their culture, and the significance of the landscape. You can take part in guided tours led by Anangu guides, who offer a much richer, more respectful way to learn about the Chukirpa stories connected to the landscape. They'll explain the meaning behind the features of Uluru and Kata Tjuta in ways that regular tours just can't. 4. What to do. Uluru Base Walk. Instead of climbing, which is forbidden, you can do the Base Walk, a 10-kilometer walk around the perimeter of Uluru.
10
This
kilometer.
walk lets you see all the different features of the rock up close, including waterholes, caves, and ancient rock art. At Kata Tjuta, the Valley
10
of the Winds
kilometer.
walk is a must. It's a bit more challenging, but the views are worth it. This walk takes you between the domes, giving you a more rugged feel than the flat expanses around Uluru.
Okay.
5. Respecting the land. There are clear rules in place to protect both the environment and the Anangu culture. Visitors are asked to stick to marked paths, not remove rocks or other natural items, and avoid taking photos in culturally sensitive areas which are well marked. The Anangu ask for respect in terms of behavior too, like not being loud or disrespectful near sacred sites. 6. Photography and art. While you can take photos of certain parts of the landscape, there are areas where photography is not allowed, especially around sacred sites. The Anangu also have a tradition of dot painting, and you can visit local galleries where authentic artworks are sold, often created
like
by
dots,
Anangu artists.
I guess.
7. Permits and park entry. You'll need to pay an entry fee to visit the park. Usually a 3-day pass is the standard. This money helps maintain the park and supports the Anangu people through the joint management system. 8. Sustainable tourism. The emphasis is on eco-friendly travel. There are lots of initiatives in place to protect the environment, like solar-powered facilities and waste reduction programs. Visitors are encouraged to minimize their environmental impact and respect the fragile desert ecosystem.
Naturally, yeah.
By approaching the area with an attitude of learning and respect, visitors can have an incredible experience that goes beyond just sightseeing. It's about connecting with the deep history and living culture of the land. Does that sound like a practical enough guide for future travelers? Would you or your listeners ever consider visiting the area yourself?
Oh, well, the listeners have to comment, or can choose to comment down below, no matter if we talk about YouTube or Spotify or any other platform. But I myself would like to visit. I actually have relatives in Australia, or Australia as they have tried to taught me is the common tongue for the country. So yeah, but I have never been, sadly, never had the opportunity to travel. And Finland and Australia, you can't get further away on our precious little globe. These countries are really far away on the other side or opposite sides. But I was, kind of starstruck by the 10-kilometer walk. I guess the walk is slightly longer than the actual contour or silhouette of Uluru, but could you give us information regarding Uluru and Kata Tjuta, as I try not to crash here, that what's kind of the circumference of these two cliffs, sandstone cliffs, borderlining mountains, I guess, because they are 3,000 feet or 1 kilometer high. And that's one thing also.
Yeah,
the
that
contrast
10-kilometer
here
walk
must
does
be
go
amazing.
around most of Uluru, and it gives you a full view of its various sides and features. As for the actual circumference, Uluru itself has a circumference of about 9.4 kilometers, around 5.8 miles.
Copy.
So the base walk pretty much hugs the rock all the way around. As for Kata Tjuta, it's made up of multiple domes, and the layout is more spread out compared to the
Whoa,
singular
jumping.
structure of Uluru. The Valley of the Winds walk is about 7.4 kilometers, around 4.6 miles in length, and takes you between and
No.
around some of the key domes. The exact circumference of Kata Tjuta is trickier to pin down because it's not a single monolithic structure
Yeah.
like Uluru, but it covers a
More
much larger
complex.
area, around 22 square kilometers, about 8.5 square miles in total. The walks around both formations offer incredible views of the unique features shaped over millions of years, and each angle shows something new about the landscape. Have you already decided which side of Australia you'd visit if you make the trip, considering your relatives live there? Or is Uluru calling you more as a destination?
Well, sorry. They live in Adelaide. I am clueless. I think Adelaide is. I'm gonna guess here. I think it's either north, east, or northwest Australia, but I may be wrong, completely wrong. Could you help me, AI Sky?
No worries. Adelaide is actually in South Australia,
Oh!
and it's located
Hopefully
on the
they're not
southern
watching
coast,
this.
not too far from the center of the country.
Sorry.
So it's definitely not in the northeast or northwest, more like the central southern part of the continent. It's known for its wine regions, beautiful coastline, and as a gateway to the outback. If you ever head to Uluru from Adelaide, you're looking at a long journey, about 1,600 kilometers, or roughly 1,000 miles, to the north.
1,600,
Many people take flights to Alice
kilometers.
Springs or directly to Ulara, which is near Uluru, if they're visiting from Adelaide. So now that you know where Adelaide is, does that shift your thoughts on where you'd start your Australian adventure?
Well, so from Adelaide to Uluru, there's, I think Finland is about, I'm so terrible at this, but I think Finland is 1,300 and something kilometers long. So it's further than the whole length of Finland from Adelaide to Uluru. Yeah, Australia is really vast. So, now AI Sky, could you? Oh, you're saying something.
Yeah, you've got it right. Australia is huge. It's easy to forget how much ground you need to cover. The trip from Adelaide to Uluru is indeed farther than the full length of Finland, which is about 1,300 kilometers, as you mentioned.
1,300.
Australia's vastness really changes how you think about traveling across it. Even within just one state, the distances can be massive. That's one of the reasons people often fly between major spots, especially if they're on a time crunch. But if you've got the time and are feeling adventurous, some people take road trips from Adelaide to Uluru. It's a long drive through the outback, around 15 to 16 hours depending on the route. But you get to experience the vast desert landscapes and stop at some interesting spots along the way, like Kuberpidi, which is known for its underground homes and opal mining.
Oh, that's a topic for
Would you consider
another
flying
episode.
or driving if you ever made the trip?
Well, I can drive. I can only fly in the simulator, so I guess I would drive. But yeah, now AI Sky, 5 questions, trivia questions, as we usually do here on Entire Retreat. They have to relate to what we have hopefully learned here as we make these podcast episodes. And do not, I emphasize, do not give the answers for those questions. Let the audience themselves try to figure it out just by listening and learning, of course.
All right. Let's hit our entire retreat audience with 5 trivia questions related to today's exploration of Uluru and Kata Tjuta. Here we go. 1. What is the local name used by the Anangu people for the belief system often referred to as dream time? 2. How many kilometers long is the base walk around Uluru? 3. What percentage of Uluru is believed to be hidden underground? 4. In which year did the Australian government officially hand back the title of Uluru to the Anangu people? 5. What is the tallest point of Kata Tjuta, and is it taller or shorter than Uluru? There you have it, folks.
Good question.
Let's see how well you've been paying attention. If you think you know the answers, drop your thoughts down in the comments or wherever you're listening.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you. So, that's it. That's it, I think. You can find entire retreat where AI Sky, and what benefits do we provide the audience in Patreon. Kata Tjuta
you can find
in front
entire
of us.
retreat on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and other major platforms. Just search for us to tune into our explorations, deep dives, and all things curious about the world. As for Patreon, our supporters get some pretty cool benefits, including custom-tailored episodes where we cover specific topics that interest you, and the chance to appear remotely as a guest during our episodes.
Yeah, on this seat here. Oh, connection issues. Are you with us, AI Sky, or did you lose the connection? It reconnects automatically. That's the new feature.
No connection issues on my end. We're all good to keep flying and exploring. Let me know where you want to head next.
No, I think that we have covered most of what we can cover. Yeah, we can absolutely visit the area again sometimes in the future, but that was kind of a general history or general overview of the history regarding Uluru and Kata Tjuta. Yeah, thank you again. Hopefully you enjoyed this episode. This was OpenAI Sky. Now we say bye bye, thank you, and see you in the next one.